2012. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone. Thanks for coming. If you didn't hear, it was Romney, Paul, Huntsman in New Hampshire. So kind of what everybody expected. Thanks for coming out on primary night. I appreciate that. We're going to open up, would you like to give an invitation? Sure. We're going to open up with an invitation from Mr. Gibbons. So if you'd all please stand back here.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for everything, Lord, and we ask you to be here with us tonight in all of the decisions that we make, the thoughts that enter our mind, and the directions that we seek. Lord, let us follow you in all of those, in our political paths, in our thoughts, in our daily walk. Lord, let us grow closer to you and bless these proceedings tonight as we seek you in everything that we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. And then if you would, stay standing for tonight's pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Starting 2012 off with a bang, probably easily our best speaker of the year. Setting a very high bar tonight, but real quickly, this is an organizational meeting for the SRA. We are electing a new board of officers for 2012, and I'm expecting absolutely no dissent from the nominations committee, so I'm going to try to get this out of the way before we bring the sheriff up. So without further ado, the nominations committee chairman, Mr. Cardozo.
Thank you.
By the way, if there is any dissent,
Leave the room.
please. But if there is any dissent from this, I will just table the proceedings until after our speakers tonight.
The first time I did this was in 1986 when SRA was founded. And the conservatives took over the California Republican Assembly. And became the conservative conscience of the California Republican Party.
Yeah.
So it's been incredible. I'm going to do this again. For re-election, Tim Snipes as president. Ron Gibbons as vice president. Joshua Speaks, who was our treasurer before, will be nominated for secretary.
And just for a point of clarification on that, I did, in order to convince Joshua to take the job, I told him we could call it something other than secretary, like parliamentarian or something like that. But he's not here tonight, so we're going to call it secretary anyway. Make sure you all call it secretary at the next meeting.
For the purpose of the bylaws, we have to call it secretary anyway. Membership director, Jared Kopp, would be new to the board. And also a new officer, a new treasurer, we are nominating John Salazar. Now, the way I normally have done this, I ask if there's any other nominations from the floor for any of these officers. Seeing none, I'm asking for a motion to adopt the report, and that would be deemed the election for our 2012 officers. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Yes. Congratulations. You have a new board of directors.
All right,
When the new board come up to the front.
Just for the record, I did ask the sheriff earlier to put me on a 72-hour mental health hold to get a witness. He refused.
Okay, so then we're going to jump right into our program. Most of you know our guest tonight. Hopefully you know him from the ballot box and not from the back of his squad car. Sheriff Scott Jones has been easily one of the best sheriffs we've ever had in the last year. We consider him a strong ally, and we plan to do everything we can to help him through his tenure and seek re-election if he chooses to do so in a couple of years. So without any further ado, Sheriff Hutchins.
Thanks. Happy to be here. I'm privileged to be able to speak to you tonight. I thought what I'd do is talk a little bit about what's kind of going on in the department. A lot of things, but I'll try and focus on a couple of things that I consider are exciting or new and novel. Talk about maybe some of the challenges that are coming for us in the near term, in the long term. Challenges for the community. We'll talk about realignment a little bit. And then maybe talk a little bit on the political side about what we can do, what we need to do from my perspective and from your perspective going forward, especially in this election year. And then certainly I'll leave enough time for questions that you have for anything, political, department-wise, personal life, whatever. I'll leave plenty of time for questions until I get the hook to get pulled out of here. So the department, I've been sworn in over a year now, and it seems sometimes it seems like 10 years, but most of the time it really seems like 10 minutes. It's incredible how fast that it goes, and I am going to stay for at least 2 terms and possibly 3. So I've got a lot of time left, but judging by how fast this year was, it's going to be literally blink of an eye. We did a lot of things this year. I developed an annual strategic planning process, which I posted on the web, so anyone can kind of look at what our priorities were for 2011, and we update those as we go through the year, and then at the end of the year we look back and say, these are the things that were our priorities, these are the things that we accomplished. We're well into that process for 2012 now, which will also
Good to see you.
I also came out early on and said that I think the #1 problem facing this region, not just the unincorporated area, but the region, Sacramento, the entire county, its cities and beyond, is youth and gang violence. It is a phenomenon that not only affects young people in terms of eradicating their abilities and their futures, but it has secondary victims as well. I mean, it used to be in the early days of gangs, you'd have one gang member shooting another gang member. Nobody would get too terribly upset about it. But now that's not the case anymore. Aside from the young people's and the families of the young people's lives that are getting disrupted, it is now creeping into all facets of all of our lives. When you have rolling gun battles down Howe Avenue in the middle of the day, a route that many of us take, that is affecting everybody. And so it's not just the victims, but it's the young people's ability or their inability to have a successful future. And those things are going to have long-term cost. And so about a week before I was sworn in, a week after I was sworn in last December, I went back to Washington, D.C. and started this kind of messaging. Youth and gang violence regional effort. We need a youth and gang violence and regional effort, our #1 issue. We need to attack it regionally and not just in silos as law enforcement has traditionally done. I've been back to Washington, D.C. 4 times since then. Be back there next week, as a matter of fact. But my message is always the same. I've met with Feinstein, Lundgren, Matsui, Boxer, the Vice President's staff twice. I've met with the Director of the COPS Office, the Department of Justice COPS Office, Barney Malecki. Message is still the same. Our #1 problem in the region, youth and gang violence, regional effort. So as we developed our strategic plan for last year, that was one of the things I put on there. I wanted youth and gang violence strategy. Well, we didn't have any staff. I didn't have any resources to devote to it, but that doesn't mean we couldn't have a strategy. In fact, my executive staff gave me a lot of grief. Says, we have nothing to do. We don't have any people to give to this effort. Why should this be one of our priorities? I said, well, would you agree that it's one of our biggest problems? Said, yes. Then why shouldn't it be one of our biggest priorities to at least develop a strategy? What are we going to do? So we did. In the meantime, we applied for our COPS grant. Now, many of you remember our layoffs in 2009. In 2010, we got 50 officers from this Department of Justice COPS office, the largest award in the country. So for the 2011 application, I made it more specific. I said, not just based on general need, but I want to do youth and gang violence, I want to do a regional effort. And that's where I went back, and all my messaging back in Washington, D.C. was consistent with our strategic objective and our strategic plan, all consistent. In the meantime, with no resources, I created 2 athletic leagues, after-school activities leagues in Sacramento County. Now, we've never had athletic leagues before. Some of you live in cities are used to PALs, police athletic leagues. We've never had one in the Sheriff's Department. Well, we did a first one right in Oak Park. And it was interesting. I've said before, we need to create relationships. We need to have experiences with young people that aren't necessarily positive, they just aren't negative. Because historically, we show up in young people's lives and we only do bad things. We take them to jail, we tell them their brother's dead, we tell them their father's in jail, whatever it is, it's never good. So people run from us. So I say, you know, it's a little too ambitious to say that we are gonna develop these great experiences, great exposures with young people, but at least we can do neutral. At least we can be in the same place as a young person where nothing bad happens, right? And those things, over time, might lead to the young person coming up to the officer, starting that relationship, you know, with the inevitable first question, have you ever shot anybody, or can I see your gun? But nonetheless, that starts the relationship. And so, with that in mind, I started an athletic league in Oak Park, right in Oak Park. And Friday night, we opened up, we partnered with St. Paul's Church, and we invited people out. And interestingly enough, you know, for the changing behavior, for people that think it takes generations, you know, when we first started handing out flyers in that neighborhood, hey, come to our athletic league Friday night, people would scatter. They wouldn't come out until we'd go up to the door, we'd tell them what we had. Well, within 4 weeks of doing this, now when the cars drive down the street in Oak Park, and they recognize the officers that are involved, you got people running to the cars like the ice cream man. It's amazing. It doesn't take much, but it just takes something. All the people that are involved in this, and by the way, it's been doubling in size almost every week. We give them meals, we raffle off bicycles and prizes. It's phenomenal. I've gone there a couple of times. It's just unbelievable. It's actually emotional. And all the officers and detectives that are involved in that, I don't pay them one dime. They do it completely on their own time. In the north area, attached to Swanston Park, we joined with the Parks and Rec District. So all the activities they offer, plus activities that our officers are interested in, have expertise in, whether it's scuba diving, skydiving, aerodynamics, they go and have these young people participate in these activities. Again, I don't pay any of them. They created a 501c3 on their own. I don't pay any of them. But we were going towards this youth and gang violence effort as a priority, even without any additional resources. Well, as many of you might know, in the fall, the COPS awards came out, and we got awarded 25 officers. Significantly, it was once again the largest award in the country for the second year in a row. Now, I went back there in August, and I promised Director Malecki, and I said, I'll promise you two things. I will promise you that we will bring you successes, and I'll promise you that it will be a regional effort. And so September, when the awards came out, we got the largest award in the country for the second year in a row. Significantly, all 25 of those cops are going to youth and gang violence. Unprecedented amount of effort towards that. We created a new division that I named the Impact Division. There's three components to it. The enforcement side, which you have to have, because after all, 6% of the people are responsible for about 60% of the crime. You're still going to have to take out those 60% of the people, whether they're young people or not. And intelligence, so everything is truly intelligence-led, how we deploy and utilize our resources for maximum effectiveness. And significantly an outreach side. I have 7 full-time officers assigned to nothing but outreach. We've never had one officer assigned to outreach. So they can do athletic leagues, explode them all over the county. They can reach people, not in just the high schools, but the elementary schools. I created a faith-based advisory board, so we are partnering with CBOs and faith-based organizations. And you talk about the regional effort, I've got people from Citrus Heights PD, Sacramento Police Department, Galt PD, Elk Grove PD, the FBI, the U.S. Marshals. Now we've got people calling us. They want to be a part of this. We're not even reaching out to people anymore. We get calls every day about people wanting to be on our effort. So it's phenomenally exciting. I think not only will we have a tremendous impact on youth and gang violence, but we will sow the seeds for long-term success. You're not going to arrest your way out of this, no matter how many people we pick off on the backside of gangs. Unless you deal with the fundamental issues of why people get into gangs, you're going to have still people going into gangs. So by attacking it boldly, I really think we're going to make a significant stride against that. So that's the most exciting thing that's happening. Realignment. Many of you know, and if you don't, the state to solve their problem was they basically thumbed their nose at the courts and told them to lower their prison population for the last half a dozen years or so. The court finally said you must release your prison population. So the way the state decided to do that was what they called low-level offender realignment. So their idea was that we're going to take low-level offenders, non-serious, non-violent, non-sexual offenders, and incidentally, assault with intent to commit rape is non-serious, non-violent. Assault with a deadly weapon is non-serious, non-violent. Assault on a peace officer, non-serious, non-violent. Elder abuse, non-serious, non-violent. The list goes on and on. But nonetheless, they decided to create all these low-level offenders and make them now the county's responsibility. So now 40,000 people, when it's all said and done, will go from the state level to the county level. Problem is, there's no room at the county jails either, but the state doesn't care about that. They need to solve the problem. And so, many of you know that I came out very strongly against realignment early in the fall. I stood alone I made a compelling argument to 41 of my sheriffs around the state, saying there's nothing in this for the sheriffs and nothing in this for our constituents. Nobody was willing to stand up with me, so I stood up alone. Got some momentum. The League of Cities voted against it. It got some momentum. Unfortunately, we ran up against the implementation date, which was October 1st of last year. Well, my opposition to it were basically threefold. Briefly, is all the logistics hadn't even been worked out yet. Number two was the money. It was underfunded to do all the things the governor purported it to be. And lastly was public safety. Now the public safety thing, the thing that affects each of you in here, is you have to understand what realignment did. Number one, it shortened sentences of offenders. It used to be that you get 1/3 of your sentence as credit in county jail. So in other words, if you got sentenced to a year, you would do 8 months if you behaved yourself. Well, now that's 1/2 the time. You do 6 months. You have people that were released from prison in favor of some of this, what they call post-release community supervision, some hybrid level of supervision that otherwise would have been in prison. You have people that were on parole that are no longer on parole, that are either on no or some low level of supervision. So you have these people that would have been in jail or prison. You have these people that would have been under a higher level or some degree of supervision that are not. And you have a statistical certainty of a 70% recidivism rate. So it's easily predictable that I believe the crime in the near term will go up. Now, theoretically, if we get these wazoo programs and lower recidivism rate, great, I'm all for it. I mean, I really do believe that as a society we need to put more effort into the front end of inmates, you know, the reintegrating back into society, getting them job skills to the extent we can, helping them succeed. I mean, I agree with that. I've advocated for that ever since I've been jail commander. But this is underfunded, and this is not the right way to do it. So I've advocated against it, but here we are. And I'm working very hard with my county to make it work to the best of our ability. One of the reasons none of the sheriffs would stand up with me is that the organization, state sheriffs, wanted to support the governor's plan. They wanted to build goodwill with the governor. Okay, I get that. But in return, the governor promised us that he would get a ballot measure on the ballot by initiative that would secure the funding for realignment. Because it's only funded until June. It's not funded beyond that. They talk about what we're going to get, but it's monopoly money at this point. So they took that at face value. I met with the governor several times personally. I met with Darrell Steinberg. I met with a lot of people. And so now here we are. There was 2 measures that were going to go on the ballot. One that simply dealt with realignment funding, securing that funding, no new taxes, just securing the funding that was set aside that we need at the county level to be able to carry out the business. It was polling at over 70% that it would pass. People get an unfunded mandate, which is what realignment has its essence. The legislature gets the luxury of saying this is not an unfunded mandate, so therefore it's not reimbursable. But it is, and people get that. So that was the county's CSAC, the County Association of Counties ballot measure that the state sheriff supported. Well, the governor's measure secured the funding, but also added 2 taxes, as well as more funding for education and some other things, some of his other pet projects. Well, that's not what we were promised. We weren't promised that he would use our measure to sexy up his tax measure, but that's exactly what happened. So the county association, CSAC, has tabled their initiative in support of the governor's at the moment, which state sheriffs has as well. So I'm going to find myself in the unenviable position now to once again speak out against the governor. As I told him, I have no interest in matching my 1 year of political experience with his. But nonetheless, right is right. And I don't have the luxury of going along and getting along at the expense of doing what is right. And so you may very well see me making some statements about that in the future, and that's what it's all about. So we have some other financial challenges. We've been financially hit ever since we got our layoffs in 2009. Since then, everybody that's been laid off has been brought back. Everybody that lost rank has been brought back. Last Friday, we hired our first deputy sheriffs since our layoffs in 2009 that had not been prior deputy sheriffs. So very exciting. I mean, it was easy to underestimate the importance of that day, but it was very significant for us. On that same day, I swore in a new undersheriff. My undersheriff, Mark Awasa, got the job as Sac State's chief. So we have a new undersheriff. So there's signs of life and exciting things all over the department. Going into next budget cycle, we're already facing a $37 million deficit because of cost of living increases because of the unions and the loss of the state contract. With realignment, we used to contract with the state for about $11 million worth of bed space. Well, they don't feel the need to pay us anymore because we have these people anyways. So we're looking at about a $37 million deficit without any regard to the economy. So if the county takes another hit, we have an adequate share to take care of. That's in addition to that $37 million. So I'd like to think we hit rock bottom. Right now I'm praying for status quo, not growth. Like I told the board, I said, you know, just keep us the way we are. All worry about the growth. All become more efficient. All become internally better at what we do. All make all the growth internally. Just keep us where we are. So, you know, that's kind of my mantra going in. It's, you know, budget negotiations are an interesting time. And traditionally you go in with what you're short and you ask for what you're short. And that's the way it's been in Sacramento County. And it's been not amicable many times in our history. I decided to do it a little differently. It was my first budget cycle. Our shortfall last year was $27.5 million. But ordinarily, I would go in and ask for $27.5 million. I'd ask the county board to solve our problem. But before I did that, I went to my new executive staff and said, I'm not going to do it. Every penny I ask for, I am going to make sure that I need. So they come back and say, okay, we can make up for about $3 million. No, go back. And we did this for months, and it was a lot of blood and sweat and tears and pain and misery. But at the end of the day, we identified about $17 million that we could absorb or we could take care of ourselves through internal efficiencies, through anticipated revenues, through a lot of different things. And so, unexpected by everyone, we went into our board hearing and I said, here's our shortfall, $27.5 million. Here's what we think we can accommodate. And as I stand here today, I can tell you with all sincerity, I don't know how I get past this $10.5 million. That's the bridge I need. They were so blown away that they restored about $5 or $6 million of it, and we through revenue increase, other efficiencies, we'll come in on budget this year for the first time in a long, long time. It was so interesting that other county department heads came to me and thanked me, because we always go first, we're the biggest budget piece of pie, right? And thanked me for not, you know, going in with gloom and doom, because we always get all the money in, and because we throw out the public safety bomb and things like that. So I think we've gotten some credibility going forward for budget cycle. We have a significant challenge, but I have a good relationship with the board. And so, you know, which brings me to a little bit of a, I guess, a kind of a political discussion, is that we need, I think, the community to carry this mantle of public safety. I'm not looking for growth. I really am not. I understand that every dollar I get has to come from somewhere else. Some other program is getting short. I get that. But we need folks to understand and to be passionate about the fact that we can't take any more law enforcement funding. We're rock bottom. We've been cut significantly, over $100 million over the last 3 years. So, you know, I do expect cuts. We will absorb our share to the extent that we can. But I have to say that even with the layoffs, the year we had the layoffs, that we have made an appeal to the public to, you know, come down to the board and express the dismay at having to lose about 20% of our sworn staff. It was a very poor turnout. And so in your daily conversations, in your conversation, if you have the opportunity to be in the same circles as supervisors or other folks that might carry that message forward, just make sure that's an important message carrying forward. You may not be able to go down during the hearings, but the more they hear that consistency of message, much like I went back to DC and had a consistent message every single time, every single person I talked to, pretty soon that's the message that just becomes the norm and it resonates with folks. So that's what I'd ask them. Now, turning it back around on me and you know, what you can ask of me, one of the things that drives me is I've come to a lot of realizations in the process to become sheriff, and certainly since I've become sheriff. And I realize, I don't know why anyone would want to listen to Scott Jones talk, frankly, but I do understand that people want to listen to Sheriff Scott Jones talk. And to the extent that I have that influence and people listen, and in fact the Sacramento County Sheriff is a big player. I have a larger constituency than any city council member, any county supervisor, any senator, assembly person, U.S. congressperson. I have a larger constituency. I have 1.4 million people under my charge. And so that makes me a significant political player. Now, I can address that in a couple of ways. I can just go along, get along, use it to support my department and keep my nose and blinders on and be focused to that end, which I am doing. Or I can use it for good, and I mean good of the entire region, not just as it relates to law enforcement, but otherwise as well. What drives me is I don't want to look back on my time, and what's always driven me is I don't want to look back and say, man, I could have, I should have, and in fact, that's the reason I'm sitting here as your sheriff today. It wasn't that it was part of my career goals, it's because I saw a better future for the department than what was laid out before me. And I couldn't stand the thought of not having done something about it and letting it go another direction. And so I don't want to look back on after my time as sheriff and say, man, I could have done something about it. I had a lot more influence that I could have used. And so I do that. I build relationships with not only our DC delegations, but locally here. Everybody that touches Sacramento County and beyond, I have built relationships with. I have their cell phone numbers. I can talk to them. They know I'm a resource. I meet with business owners all the time. I'm firmly convinced that the only way out of this economic decline and have sustained economic health is to have a healthy business climate in Sacramento County. I know it seems inimical to the thinking in California in general, that you would actually need businesses to support all the social programs that we want to have.
Yeah.
But it's common sense, and I don't get why other people don't get it. So I want to make sure that I'm treating businesses as customers, just like the person who calls 911. I've created a business advisory board. I spend a lot of time meeting one-on-one with business owners, business leaders in the community, whether they voted for me or not, because I want to make sure that I'm creating, from the public safety side, a healthy environment for businesses to thrive, businesses to stay, and businesses to relocate here. Even if it does not touch upon public safety, my message is still the same. Let me know. Things will cross their radar and your radar. They won't cross mine. But if there's some way I can exert some influence or have influence of some pursuit or against some pursuit that's going to have a chilling effect on business or that doesn't make any sense, let me know that too. Because while I do have some influence, I don't intend to be a shrinking violet in this position. So to the extent, and while I'm still young and have youth and vigor and energy, which all may end next week, I don't know, I do plan on doing that. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on the political side. So with that, I'm happy to respond to any questions.